Hey, everybody, welcome. Simon Rosenberg here, special guest today. Katie Phang is with me. Katie, welcome back to our Hopium world. It's great to have you here. As everyone knows, or not everybody knows, but I have a Katie at home. My one daughter is named Katie, so it's always exciting to hang out with another Katie. Katie's an important part of our life, and so welcome. Listen, we haven't gotten together in a little while. Lots happened. We had a big election last week. We had then the Senate deal, which is winding its way through Congress this week. The House is coming back tomorrow, we think. What's your assessment of things? Just how are you seeing things these days?
I have a little whiplash, don't you? I mean, when you and I, in an interest of full transparency with all of our viewers and subscribers, Simon, when you and I had originally communicated post Tuesday night election results, I really thought that you and I would be doing kind of a postmortem in a great way of how things transpired. And I was really looking forward to going beyond just reading your fantastic posts on Substack about what you thought happened. And I wanted to get a little bit more of a data dive because for me, the goal was and continues to be, let me be clear, replicating that success going into 2026 and beyond. And then as I said on my YouTube channel yesterday, I woke up on Monday with a sense of betrayal. You, myself, and others in various ways have been fighting day in and day out in so many different fronts and in so many different ways. And I felt a lot betrayed yesterday because I just didn't understand this kind of shooting yourself in the foot mentality. And I'm concerned because there is, for example, Ro Khanna right now just posted on Substack that Chuck Schumer needs to go. But I'm also simultaneously irritated that people are criticizing me and others for a circular firing squad mentality, which I think also cheats us from being able to fully express our frustration with the way things are unraveling at this point. That being said, it doesn't eliminate my fighting spirit. I am the quintessential cage rattler, as you know, Simon, but I am a little bit stunned by what I think is a myopia of what this deal will portend. And I'm more than irritated that people are like, well, Katie, the Republicans were never going to allow a vote on the ACA, or they were never going to support it. And I'm like, well, then what the hell just happened 41 plus days and counting? Then if the capitulation was the game, then we should have freaking done it 41 days ago. So I am trying to pick myself up and to analyze the pieces. But sometimes, Simon, as you know, analysis is really not the point. Some of it is just the ability to express our frustration and to be there for each other in community, and then to kind of pick ourselves up.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that I was really surprised on Sunday. And like you, when we were talking last week, I was excited to hang out with you and go through the election results and nerd out on some of the data. And then, there was a change and I was really surprised. And I was surprised just from as somebody who follows the data very closely. We not only have been winning this argument with them where far more, the person who has eroded the most, has taken the biggest hit during the shutdown, has actually been Donald Trump. I mean, Trump's approval rating, his handling of the shutdown, and has eroded the most. Ours standing, we continued to get far greater sort of grades from the public about sort of our intentions and what we were trying to do.
As we should.
And as we should, because we were trying to help people and they were trying to hurt them.
Yes.
I also think that Trump's response to our just a desire to negotiate, right, which is it's part of how our political system works, was so over the top, and he reinforced our basic arguments about him, is that he's actually doing things to hurt people and not help them, and then he's also acting like a mad king, and he's acting impulsively.
Let them eat cake energy, Great Gatsby energy,
all that, and tearing down the White House and building a ballroom in the middle of the shutdown. So I assumed after the very strong election results that this would go on longer, and I think it's important as we now sort of dig ourselves out of the rubble here a little bit from the last couple of days to recognize that I do think that the shutdown was important for us. I think it contributed significantly to our really enormous victories last week, these huge margins that we had. I would have continued it, but they made a decision not to. They had their reasons, right, to do it. I still think that politically they had more running room. And I think the timing of it was wrong. I think we needed to have another, more time to sort of do the victory laps and to rub Trump's failure into his face and the Republican Party into their face. We haven't had an election that's had been this kind of clean a win and clean repudiation of Trump really almost since 2018, right? Because in 2020, it got muddied by January 6th and him contesting the election. This was a clear, unequivocal repudiation of him. And so I think, if I can just say one other thing about just what I've been looking at in data in the last few days.
Please.
What's been surprising to me, not surprising, but what is affirming is that there has been a little bit of polling since the election, not a lot, but things continue to move against them. They're continuing to weaken. And it's why I wrote a piece today that, the Republicans are coming out of this period of shutdown, battered and weakened and more unpopular than they were before. You've seen these kind of big structural measures of our relative health of our party, not just the strong election results where we won all across the country by huge margins and started recreating our margins with young people and Hispanics, which are really important, and Asians as well, right? We saw a restoration of some of those margins. But you're seeing now for Trump that even in sort of right-wing polls that have been kind of propping him up for the last, few months and sort of masking his decline on the right, those polls have all started shifting very dramatically in recent days. And so I think when the dust settles here in the next few days, where we are is that the Republican Party is still historically unpopular. Their agenda is even more so. Their president is ailing and is in ill health and is clearly in physical and cognitive decline. And that they just tried to sell this agenda all across the country, and it failed miserably. And so I'm optimistic now that as we sort of right ourselves after this and we watch Mike Johnson struggle to whatever, the mess that the House is going to be this week, that we can re-find our sense of confidence and strength that we had a few days ago, coming out of this in order to go do this next fight. And the next fight is going to be, we do have to have a budget for the United States. I mean, we haven't really even begun that process in any kind of meaningful way. And they need 60 votes for the final budget. And so we're going to have opportunities here, I think, in the coming months to really continue to remind people about the harms that the budget is doing to them, and to reassert, how we are different from they are, how we want to help people, they want to hurt people. And so I'm a little bit more optimistic today than I was perhaps 2 days ago about, the next 3 to 6 months to a year, getting through the emotional kind of whiplash, as you pointed out, and the disappointment, I think that was fairly universal in our family over the last few days.
So I always consider you to be a friend in a safe space, and I just am struggling with what you just said. And it's not because, and you know me, I am an optimist, and everybody who knows me knows that part of my fighting spirit is I like to kick people's asses in like a positive way, right? Like, let's advance the ball in a great way for everybody. But this is where, if I may, for just a second, Simon.
That's why we're here, Katie, right?
Rant for just a hot second.
Yeah.
What you just said a couple of minutes ago is my biggest freaking issue. This is a continuing resolution, and I have railed against continuing resolutions because it just kicks the can down the road. And we have suffered as Americans with continuing resolutions when it comes to the budget. If you'll recall, what was it last year? Not even, Simon, how many CRs did we have to eventually get to the point where we were facing pressure from the debt ceiling, et cetera, right? I mean, and eventually we got a budget. But the budget was this crazy, big, beautiful bill caca, right, in July as well, that just is destroying America from inside out. And now we are just kicking this to a CR that expires in January 30th of 2026. Simon, that's not even 2.5 months from now. And then the 3 full appropriation bills called the minibus, fantastic. SNAP benefits are back. WIC is back. Certain agencies are funded. Certain programs are funded. Fine. But and the illegal firings and the reductions in force during government shutdowns and the back pay getting come back. Fine. But Simon, I feel like I said, I feel like I'm getting gaslit those illegal firings were illegal from the beginning. There's a reason why I and others at DDF, Democracy Defenders Fund, with Norm Eisen and my colleagues and other coalition partners, that's why we sued. We sued in California because of this on behalf of government employees. So for the Republicans to be getting rewarded for stopping doing illegal things they weren't supposed to be doing in the first place blows my mind. And the SNAP benefits should have been funded in the beginning. But has everybody forgotten that the big bullshit bill slashed $186 billion in SNAP funding anyway?
Right.
That's not necessarily going to be it's just I just feel like we are being gaslit. And I don't know why people are also not acknowledging that there was clearly some backroom dealing that happened with these 8 senators, Simon, 2 of whom are resigning, none of whom are up in 2026. Are we also supposed to just conveniently forget this when they're up in 28 and 30? They don't have any skin in the game. So maybe they said, yes, I will be a sacrificial lamb for purposes of this. Some of them I do think ideologically did want to side with the Republicans on this. And I'm tired of people being like, well, Katie, people are getting fed. I am the last person you need to be convincing of that. I have been losing my mind over the SNAP benefits issue, but I've also been losing my mind over Medicare, Medicaid cuts, and the fact that these tax subsidies are not going to be extended because this vote is not a requirement, Simon, in December. And so if you're telling me that they were never going to approve the extension on the tax subsidies or the credits for ACA, Simon, then what was the point of 41 days of a shutdown?
So
listen, tell me where I am wrong.
No, you're doing a phenomenal job. And there aren't many people that I have been on with that would have been able to go into the detail of the deal and also the minibus and everything else, because this is what happened to some degree was arcane. And I want to just echo, no, but it's super important. So I'm glad we're talking about this because we're about to go through 2 months of this, right?
We don't even have the House. I understand that by the number, Simon, it's probably going to happen, but it's just people. I don't know if people think do they think like everything's going to get back to normal tomorrow because of this? It's not going to happen as fast as they think it's going to happen.
No. So let's talk about this for a second. I want to respond to the way that you described all this and affirm your sentiment, which is that I do think that I have this line that American exceptionalism has been a problem for us this year, where I think for many of our political leaders, not all, they've had a very hard time really imagining the gravity of the destruction that's taking place in the country and to our democracy. And that there is, I use this line at Hopium that, the line that the old from Robert Frost, that the best way out is always through. There isn't going to be a version of what happens next that isn't going to be the hardest thing that all of us have ever done, right? There just isn't going to be, because one of the things that has to happen next time is there has to be legal accountability for the laws that have been broken and for the plundering, which was something we were unable to do last time.
That's right.
And that's going to have to happen this time, even with a corrupt Supreme Court. We've got, even if we win back the House and the Senate and the presidency, we're still going to be dealing with the need to reform the Supreme Court, which is going to be unbelievably difficult and challenging. And so my view is we have a very kind of hard road ahead of us. And so we might as well get on with it, right? There just isn't any longer sort of an easy path out of here, or things are going to snap back to normal. And I think that for some folks in our family, that's been hard to accept. And I think that, perhaps that's part of what we just saw happen in the last few days. Because I will tell you, I one of the things that I have found to be a little bit hard to believe is that Democrats really believe that there's any possibility that these negotiations between Trump and the House Republicans and the Senate Democrats and the Senate Republicans is going to happen in good faith, right? That these are going to be some kind of normal negotiations because they were able to get 3 appropriations bills through the Senate, and somehow dealing with Mike Johnson and Trump and Russell Voigt is going to somehow be normal. And that's why I think that I just want to pick up because what you're implying, I just want to fast forward through this, is that's why what I've been talking about since the summer is that what Democrats need to be doing now is to make clear what we're willing to accept in the final budget and what we won't accept under any circumstances. And I think it would be reasonable for the Senate Democrats and House Democrats to come together and say, here are the things in the final budget there's no possibility that we'll ever vote for. Increasing ICE funding, right? We're not going to support the clean energy tax cuts that are raising electricity prices. If the tariffs are found to be illegal, we're never going to support those, right? Under any circumstances. We're not going to support the dismantling of NIH and the abandonment of vaccines. We're not going to support the abandonment of our allies, right? We could have an agenda that says, hey, we're really excited to negotiate with you guys, but these things are like off the table. If you want any of our...
Didn't we say that about ACA? We said that about the ACA tax cuts.
I understand. And we have to learn from what just happened, right? We have to grow from our mistakes, right, that just took place. And because they need 7 votes. And so, because I think, Katie, one of the things that I'm interested in is that I believe, and this is me, I'm not speaking for anybody, that, we want them to get rid of the filibuster, because then they're going to have to own the whole budget themselves. They won't have any cover for what's about to happen. And remember, even the big ugly bill, they only got 50 votes in the Senate. This bill that they have to vote on, this final bill, is going to be uglier. Trump's approval rating is much further. They've just taken a big shellacking. Their thing, I think, as we go into this fight, part of what I'm arguing in my original thing was, I think we're structurally much stronger than we understand, than we just performed in our own negotiation, and they're much weaker, and therefore we should have far more ambition about what we're trying to get out of these negotiations than we just demonstrated. And that's where perhaps you and I are in agreement.
So part of, and I don't mean to be so elementary about this, but part of the way that I look at a power balance, right? And I don't mean to oversimplify, so you tell me where I'm wrong on this, Simon, is that if you're telling me that the Republicans are weaker or being perceived as being weaker, and Trump has the, disapproval rating or his approval ratings going down, I don't see how a cell phone by the Democrats necessarily, it's not like it's been going like this, right? I guess, I'm trying to understand how a cell phone by the Democrats, where now we're kind of getting, because remember, this is a party affliction, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The 8 senators themselves have now put targets on their backs in terms of being possible primaried, candidates, right? But I feel like the Democrats in general, if you saw the comments on my social, it was so viscerally just expressive of anger towards the Democrats at large, and people being like, well, this is why I think being an independent is better. I'm not quite sure how the Democrats thought that a self-own on this was necessarily going to improve their standing with the electorate, especially considering, look, I would have taken even Chuck Schumer's offer on Friday of the 1-year ACA tax subsidy extensions, because I felt like that at least would get us to the midterms in 2026. And that would be a fantastic way of showing the voting population that we as Democrats are really fighting for America's working families, because then it would have given us a longer runway of being able to hammer in why the Republicans suck and how they just want to sit there and just improve their own standing on the backs of Americans, especially our working families. But now, how is this not going to be an undercut thing? I mean, I get it. We get to draft the bill and the bill's language for December. But I will tell you that an off-the-record conversation with a Senate Democrat was the following. What just happened was Democrats pissing in the punch bowl while we're still at the party. And I don't disagree with that statement. And so I'm trying to see how we have now not shifted, Simon, from looking at let's just vote D all the way down, right? Top of ballot, down ballot, just vote for every Democrat, to now I feel like we've now shifted to let's really critically analyze each candidate in and of their own selves, in and of their own standing. And shit, maybe there's a Republican that actually stands for something that my Democrat doesn't stand for. I'm horrified by that being the possibility of us going into 2026.
Yeah, and I think it's a possibility. I think it's also unlikely, and let me explain why. That because I think this is an important conversation we're having, because this is top of mind for a lot of people. My view about politics in recent years, and one of the reasons I sort of got everything right in 2022 when most people got things wrong, was that I think the most powerful force in our politics since 2017 has been fear and opposition to MAGA. It's the thing that drove the 2018 elections. It drove the 2020 elections. It drove the 2022 elections, where we dramatically overperformed in many of the battleground states. It drove the 2023 elections. It didn't drive the 2024 elections, in part because I don't think we ran enough negative ads, and we didn't really evoke the ugliness of Trump adequately for the electorate. And the DNC is going to be releasing a report in the next few weeks that will certainly suggest that, perhaps as one of their conclusions. And that we've now seen in 2025, despite in the polling, despite Democrats being disappointed in their party, we have far higher motivation than Republicans, and we just had this really strong performance in the election. And so what you're saying is possible, but I think what we've been seeing is that despite the disappointment people have had in the National Party over the last 6 to 8 months, we just had this extraordinary election because people understand the assignment. They understand that the biggest issue that is disappointed they may be in Democrats, the threat of Republicans and MAGA is far greater and creating far more motivation in the electorate. We're about to test that, though, to your point. This is not a given when I'm laying out. It's, to me, the likely scenario, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's what's going to happen. And certainly, what I wrote this morning, Katie, was that there are two sort of lessons from authoritarianism that stick with me every day, that I've learned from people like, all the people, Timothy Snyder and others that we see. One is that, when you appease an autocrat, they take more and they escalate, which is part of the fear I think many of us have about what just happened. But the second thing is that if we splinter, they can stay in power for a long time. And so we have this sort of dual need to both adequately go after him, because this was in repudiation, this election, of him. It wasn't just affordability. It wasn't just healthcare. It wasn't just threats to democracy. It was the whole project. Because if you look at what happened in California,
let
me give you new stats on this, right? The turnout in that election is going to be higher than the midterms in 2022.
You mean to vote on
in California? Yeah. Which is insane, right? And it shows that if you run against Trump and all of his ugliness, right, you can jack up your numbers through the roof, as they did in California. And they didn't run on affordability in California. They ran on these basket of issues of Trump destroying our democracy and doing harm to the country.
The redistricting stuff.
And the redistricting stuff. And so I think that just where I'm going with this is that we have to together in the coming months both continue to recognize and help our leaders understand that appeasement and capitulation breeds greater illiberalism and greater ambition in Trump, and we have to fight much harder. But the second thing is we also have to stay together through what will be a bumpy period, because if we split and splinter, that's how opposition movements can be out of power for a generation. And we need to be able to do both of these things simultaneously, in my view, in the coming months.
In avoidance of confusion, let me be very clear. I am not suggesting that we splinter. I am suggesting that we actually are, you're going to see, to your well-taken point, a bigger push back against Trump, MAGA, and the authoritarianism that's being evidenced through him actually putting it into all of our federal agencies and the policies, et cetera, in his executive orders. But what I suspect, Simon, is going to be the following. It's going to be on an individualized basis, right? Because I think what people are feeling about the electeds is, did we not send a clear enough message on No King's Day 2.0? Did we not send a clear enough message on November 4th of last week that we want certain people to be in offices as electeds to do these things for us? I think the real kind of betrayal right now that I speak of is kind of, did the current electeds in roles of leadership? Because, I mean, it depends, Simon, how you take the scuttlebutt. Either Schumer wasn't able to control these senators, 8+. I heard around it's about 12 or 14 of them. Like, he wasn't able to control them. There was no whipping of anything that was going on. And that's what happened. And that's created a no confidence issue right now, which I think is something we're hearing people percolating. I mean, I'm literally seeing on social media, how do you get Chuck Schumer out of office? And again, this is not an indictment of Chuck Schumer, what I'm saying, but I'm wondering if this is more, again, the individual stepping forward and saying, I don't care what my party affiliation is, Simon, I'm just sick of this. And so I'm going to vote for the person who's going to fight for me, regardless of what their party is. But to your point, it's going to be a Democrat and not a Republican, right? But we've seen breakaways on the GOP. Rand Paul voted no. Rand Paul, and again, I'm not saying I'm inviting these people to Thanksgiving dinner, but Rand Paul, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and others have shown that they're not taking a lot of this either, because either they're, up for election or they actually care. But either way, I am just wondering how we still take And maybe it's not a disconnect. Maybe the reason why everybody won on Tuesday as resoundingly as they did across the United States, especially in California, to your point on Prop 50, was we're just sick and tired of being trampled on, and we want somebody to actually do right by us. And
Gavin fought, and Gavin was fighting, right? Like
Gavin fought, and
yeah.
people were like, oh, some people were like turning their nose up. And I'm like, no, no, no. I mean, let me be very clear, too, in the interest of full transparency. I was a surrogate for Prop 50 because I really believed that this is what we needed to have in light of what was happening in Texas, Missouri, and other places. But I'm just kind of wondering, you know, and listen, I'll get over it, Simon. I promise you I will.
It's not getting over it. I think that you're
Or I'll
speaking for a lot of
redirect
people.
this. I'll channel it in a different way, but I just feel like it was such a self-own. I just don't understand why there would be this. And I don't want anybody to think, Simon, that I'm sitting here with my tummy full, which it is, right? Like I'm able to feed myself, but I don't want anybody to think that I wasn't mindful of the suffering. But because I'm mindful of the suffering, I'm trying to have somebody give me a clear answer as to why we've done suffering for 41 days if this is where we were going to end up.
So, Katie, let me give you more ammunition for your fire here, right? In this is that, look, not only did I believe that we were going to stay in the fight and was surprised this happened, I think that we also recognize that the way this was handled suggested a lack of sophistication of operating in the information space, right? That there wasn't a preparation done. They didn't walk us through what they were going to do. They didn't lay the groundwork. It just sort of happened on a Sunday, with no kind of real warning. Trump, it looked on Friday as if Schumer had gone to this negotiating position that I think many of us were really comfortable with, right? With the 1-year extension of the ACA as being our place. And it all happened really quickly over a weekend without kind of any public heads up and sort of like, let's have a conversation in the family about what we're doing. And by the time they went to the podium on Monday, like the die had been cast and that they had lost the ability to break through and make their explanation for why they did what they did. And so they lost control of the narrative and the story. They also, my other criticism of the way they did this is they didn't make this about saving the country from the harms of Trump, right? This should have been done with a way of just making this all about him and his venality and his malevolence and his malicious behavior, as opposed to it being a cave. And so it was also in the execution. I mean, there's a scenario where they could have done this in a way that would have brought a lot more people along with them to say, we just don't want people to starve. We want people to be, the air traffic control system in America is crashing, right? But that didn't happen. And so what we ended up with was this sense, to your point, of like, WTF, guys, what are you doing, right? And all this. But the second thing that I think that I just wanted to say to you is that, I've written and talked a lot about over the last year and a half, going back into the summer of 2024, and about this concept of strong and weak. And if I can just spend a minute talking about this, because I think this is really important for your own commentary, is that we in our party poll a lot about issues. So when we listen, which is what polling is in focus groups, it's a way to listen, to make sure you are hearing people and understanding where their heads are at, to help inform your politics. We almost exclusively poll around issues like healthcare and inflation. And we don't have a sophisticated way of polling in other areas and other attributes that people actually vote on. So things like strong leader, weak leader, or what happened, are winning and losing. Like, is this, and so all these other things that as a television commentator that go into sort of the assessment of a candidate or a party are often not well measured by us. The strong and weak, what we call in the business, strong leader, weak leader, is the way that Trump sees everything. He sees everything through one fundamental prism, which is that he's strong, we're weak, he's winning, we're losing, he's a hero, we're villains, right? And we are struggling to understand how central this issue of strength is to how people make up their understanding of parties and candidates. And so I'll give you an example. In the exit polls, on all the questions around sort of was Kamala empathetic and sort of got it, and she had enormously high scores on all that stuff. on being strong enough to deliver on your agenda, which is a really important question, right? Is that, do you think the leader is strong enough not to just say the right thing, but to actually get it done? She lost those voters 3-1, 74-24 in the election. That was a brutal, sign that people like us, but they don't think we're strong enough to actually deliver for them, right?
Yeah.
We have to really work on this. And this is why when we were fighting, we just had this amazing election result, right? Where we looked like we were strong enough to deliver for people. And that's why what just happened raises all these same fundamental questions about, not are Democrats well-intentioned and do they want to do the right thing, but can they get it done? Can they score the touchdown? Can they be there for me when they're in power? Can they deliver for me? And these are things that we have to become more conscious as a family. That is very central right now to the way that people are assessing the health of the two political parties and our leaders. And we have to, and that's why, understanding strength in the way, and it's part of the reason that Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger had these enormous victories in New Jersey, is that they talked about strength. They went into the fight, right? I'm going to fight and deliver for you. And that's why when we don't, it matters. And that's why I think we have a lot of work to do to really come to understand that we're operating in a world now where strong and weak may be the single most important dimensions of American politics when you're confronting a strong man.
Well, and we've heard that that's one of the primary reasons why so many people like Trump, this idea that he's a strong man, right? And that actually lends itself to the whole autocratic regime concepts too, as Tim Snyder, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, and others have explored. I will say this. I think there was another lost opportunity cost that hasn't been discussed that I would love to talk about more, which now or later, whatever, which would be the following. So I had Miles Taylor and I did a Substack last week when I was in Denver, and we were both frustrated that we felt like the Democrats didn't actually use the shutdown for the opportunity it provided to be able to do something maybe like public hearings on issues that matter to Americans, because clearly with the government not functioning, courtesy of, Mike Johnson not having the Republicans there, et cetera, like why not capitalize on that vacuum? And in an attention economy, why not bring it to the Americans in a way where they saw Democrats are working, they're physically in DC, they're calling in Epstein victims, they're calling in people that are impacted by increase in premiums when these ACA tax subsidies are gone, right? I mean, why not do that? I felt like there was so much opportunity wasted. And now I think that's why I'm so salty, right? It's like we have these 41 days and counting, by the way. The government shutdown is not over, people. It's still happening. And we're still litigating on SNAP benefits, right? I mean, it's still happening in real time. And I just feel like that was another colossal failure for the Democrats to not capitalize on that and make it something even richer and even better and more beneficial, so that we could maybe dig in a little bit deeper, perhaps to go beyond Sunday's capitulation. But I will say this. Yesterday at the end of my YouTube episode, Simon, I said the following, which I think you and your followers would appreciate. I said, look, there's that famous Churchill quote, which is, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. And that's what we have to do. I just think, again, some of us are a little pissed off, myself included. And I just think that we need to just a hot second to lick our wounds a little bit before we figure out how to continue in the fight. I am railing against and rattling cages as I do every day. It's just, I think the failure to communicate this in an effective and clear way to Democrats and Americans is going to haunt the Democrats much more so than I think they gave an appreciation for.
Well, we'll end here with me just saying that I agree with much of what you just said. And part of what I do every day, I have an old colleague who used to say that Simon's job in politics is to be figuring out how to take the next hill while we're in the finishing cleaning up this hill, right? And that we're already looking ahead, right? How do we?
Yes,
so I've been spending a lot of time trying to, frankly, understand how we go forward, given the disappointment that happened, right? And given this sense that, hey, we thought you were fighting for us, and you decided, not to in some ways. And I know that Lawrence O'Donnell and others are making cases that this was actually very strategic in what the Democrats did. I'm open to that argument. What I'm not really open to is that we didn't sell it well. And I think it's getting back to something that you said, which is that I think I think there have been a few big struggles that we've had as a family. Is that I think it's been harder for these hidebound institutions, the House and the Senate, for the leaders to become modern communicators in the way that Gavin Newsom has, and our new mayor of New York has, obviously, in recent times. I think there's been a real struggle with understanding the new information space that we live in. And you pointed out several observations about it. We've gone through that today. I think the big one, that's got to be one of the big takeaways here. So, because we're about to go through another titanic budget fight, or actually we're going to begin the budget fight.
I was
right?
going to say, we're going to do it again.
Yeah, we're going to, right. And we have to now learn, to your point, right? I mean, the way I described it at Hopium today, somebody was saying like this was like a fumble. It's a fumble, but the game is still going on. Like there's still more time to go.
Accurate.
And to sort of figure. And so we are in this fight. In my view, we're in two concurrent fights every day for the next year. One is we need to win the 2026 midterms. And I think there is a legitimate possibility that we can flip the House, the Senate, and get to a majority of governorships. We should, I think, have significant ambition now, given that you've seen the sort of shift, the battlefield shift between 7 and 12 points, which means that even in states like Ohio and Alaska, we've got a shot now, right, in the Senate. But the second thing is we're in this daily battle now to keep the harms that Trump is doing to all of us front and center in our politics. And we did that through the shutdown. What that shutdown became was about him screwing over everybody. And while he was, lining his own pockets and building his ballroom and everything else. And we're going to need to have a far greater kind of sensibility of the need of our congressional leaders to not give this to the candidates, but how they can use, to your point about the hearings and other things, that we need to keep the harms that he's doing to all of us front and center in our politics every day. That has to be one of the big takeaways from why, in my view, the shutdown fight was actually successful for us up until a point, up until we fumbled, right? To use that term, I think Josh Marshall has been using that. And that because it helped us win these elections and sort of put the harms Trump was doing. And then Trump responded by doing even more harm. And I think even pushing himself further and further away from the electorate. We have this huge budget fight now, and we're going to have budget fights next year, and we're going to have legislative battles next year. And we need to go into battle mode here, 24/7, 365. There has to be a significant increasing in the sophistication of the way that we're engaging the public around these issues, and not believe that giving a floor speech is sort of the way that you do it, right? And so those of us who have more sophistication in this stuff, Katie, we need to help our House and Senate leaders become better at all of this, because that will have an impact on how well we do in the midterms next year. And so, but we're going to have this opportunity now, to your point, just 2 months. There's been virtually no work done in the House on the appropriations bills. And, they're going to be asking Democrats to support ICE increases and cutting clean energy subsidy cuts and, potentially the tariffs and the gutting of NIH and all this stuff. And we are going to have an opportunity in this fight to make it clear who we are and what our values are, and who they are and what their values are. And we need to view it not as a legislative battle, but a communications one. And I think if we can do that, this next period becomes an opportunity. We will have learned from some of the mistakes that we've made in recent weeks and get stronger and better, which is what you need to do. But we have to help our leaders understand what the assignment is now, and to keep the pressure on.
Amen. I really don't have anything to add other than amen. I mean, it's what we need to do. We need better. We need better communicators. Period. Hands down. And I believe that we're there. And I love the way that you just drew the parallels between the fights that we have. We have a bigger battle for 2026 and beyond. But there are some of us that day in and day out, I sometimes equate it to feeling like I'm Sisyphus, rolling the boulder up the hill to have the boulder roll back down in this way has been very hard. And so I feel like on a granular level, it's part of the reason I think I've been so frustrated since Sunday night on this. But as you see, I'm not dissuaded at all. In fact, I'm reinvigorated. I'm just salty about it. That's all.
Katie, salty Katie is okay with me, and I have a salty Katie at home that I've been living with for the last 20 years. So
Love it. Love it.
the
You get it on both
forces.
fronts.
I know the force is very strong with my Katie, and
Simon, I'm
but
always
anyway,
grateful for you letting me spend time with you and all
yeah.
of your subscribers. I'm very grateful as always. So thank you
Well,
for letting me
Katie,
be.
where do people find you? How do they find you?
Well, I have a YouTube channel where I do the rattling of the cages. Katie Phang News is on YouTube, and I'm also on Substack at Katie Phang. And I'm on all social media platforms, and I appreciate any support people can give as I exist in the land of independent media.
I know you do, and you're working your ass off. I mean, there was a
Trying.
day a few weeks ago where I think you did 4 live events in one day because I subscribed to your thing, and I was like, oh my God, she is just busting her ass
I'm
here.
also
So
traveling. I'm traveling a lot too. I just got back from Denver for NAPABA, the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association's annual gala. I'll be in Texas starting Thursday for the Texas Tribune Festival. I mean, I'm trying to spread the good word all far and wide is what I'm
listen,
trying to do.
I think doing this work, by the way, and traveling is very hard. I mean, I have
It is very
traveled.
hard.
I've traveled very little since I founded Hopium because I just when you travel, it's so I admire your travel because I think it's incredibly hard to travel and to be out with real people and do all this stuff. And so thank you for your hard work, and thank
Oh,
you
that's
for
sweet. Thank
your
you.
perseverance, and let's keep fighting, girl. And we really appreciate everything you're doing every day. And this was a great conversation, and let me say that I think this was important because you are speaking for a lot of people in my community that have been in our conversations. And so I'm grateful for you not pulling any punches and airing this out, because we need to have a big conversation in the family about what happened and how we go forward. And so grateful for that today too.
Well, thank you for giving me the safe space to be able to express myself in a way without judgment. That's a very important gift that you offer, Simon, especially at Hopium. And I do love that you continue to refer to us as a family. I actually would love to steal that from you and
Go
continue
ahead.
to use that because I want to be clear. I'm not going to take my food and sit at another table. I will still be breaking bread with everybody. I just feel like, to your point, we just need to educate others a little bit better, especially those that are the forward-facing, public-facing part of our family. I think that's a very important thing.
Okay. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Please subscribe, share, be part of Katie's universe. She's working her butt off every day, become more involved in Hopium. And look, we got to remember 2 things, right? That I said at the very beginning, which is that number 1 is that if you appease a dictator, an autocrat, they take more, and we need to be fighting all the time. And second of all, we hang together, hang separately, and we need to, despite the bumps and the disappointments, we need to hang together because otherwise they win. So let's go, everybody. Thank you so much. Take care.